As we turn from reflection to leadership, it is my honor to welcome on stage Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign and European Affairs, Ms. Tanja Fajon.
Esteemed guests from near and far, dear friends of Bled Strategic Forum. 20 years ago, Slovenia launched this forum with a simple belief. Diplomacy must serve people and not power. That belief resonates even more urgently today. We gather in Bled in the midst of crisis, in the midst of wars, injustice and deep uncertainty, in what truly feels like a runaway world. Fear too often divides us or paralyzes us. And in such turbulent times, we need steady anchors. The rule of law, shared solidarity and a moral conscience. Slovenia strives to be one of them. As a member of the European Union and as a member of NATO and the UN Security Council, Slovenia does not stand on the sidelines. We believe peace is built through diplomacy, justice through law, and security through cooperation. But how do we turn these principles into action? Let me present our 3 tests of commitment. The first is Ukraine. Russia's aggression in direct attack on Europe's peace and security. Slovenia and the European Union stand firmly with Ukraine, supporting its right to a free, sovereign and unified future. Peace cannot come at the cost of justice or territorial integrity. We reject outcome that rewards aggression. Together with our European and transatlantic partners, we will continue to provide long-term security, reconstruction support and a clear path to European Union membership. Ukraine's future is Europe's future, and we will not turn away. Second is Gaza. The situation in Gaza and beyond. It is beyond our imagination. Every single day, because of relentless bombings and deliberate starvation, an entire classroom of children is lost. Day after day, the numbers grow. Life-saving humanitarian aid is deliberately blocked, while lives are extinguished before the world's eyes and entire families are erased. Slovenia recognized the state of Palestine because we believe peace demands justice, and a viable 2-state solution is the only way forward. We acted, imposing an arms embargo on Israel, banning settlement imports, and declaring 2 extremist ministers persona non grata. We've sent emergency aid and continue to demand unimpeded humanitarian access. At the upcoming UN General Assembly in September, we will advocate for wider recognition of Palestine and a renewed push for peace. A ceasefire is urgent. Hostages must be released, and aid must flow. We are also considering joining South Africa's case before the International Court of Justice, because accountability cannot wait, and neither can justice. And while Gaza commands the world's attention, it is not the only humanitarian crisis. From Sudan to other regions torn by war and hunger, millions more are suffering, often in silence. Finally, we turn to the Western Balkans. Enlargement is not a favor. It is a geostrategic necessity. The region must pursue reforms that strengthen democracy, the rule of law and human rights, while the European Union must honour its commitments. We commend peaceful civic demonstrations, including in Serbia, as vital expressions of European aspiration. In Bosnia and Herzegovina, the strict enforcement of court rulings is essential to uphold the rule of law and ensure accountability. Investing in youth is essential to create opportunities that counter the lure of emigration. Slovenia remains committed to fostering dialogue and advancing a future where the Western Balkans, alongside with Moldova, Ukraine, is fully integrated in Europe. Peace is no longer threatened only by bullets. It is also under attack from lies. Democracies cannot survive without truth, yet today disinformation, foreign interference and the misuse of artificial intelligence are eroding our trust, distorting reality and weakening democratic institutions from within. As a former journalist myself, I have seen how dangerous the collapse of shared truth can be. In this environment, we must urgently restore effective multilateralism, choosing cooperation over confrontation, reform over deadlock, and human dignity over manipulation. And peace must be inclusive. Women, so often the first to suffer in conflict, must also be the first to shape its resolution. Slovenia remains a committed champion of the women, peace and security agenda. So how do we, friends, resolve all these crises? First, we must unite Europe and our NATO allies behind a bold and principled global role. Second, we must restore effective multilateralism, a UN Security Council that acts decisively and not stalls. Third, we must uphold international law consistently without double standards. And fourth, we must choose truth over fear, justice over silence, and people over power. And as a foreign minister, I have seen the quiet strength of diplomacy, of building trust, seeking political solutions and listening with intent. Even a small country can make a meaningful difference when it stands firmly for international law and acts with principles in times of crisis. Today, over 120 armed conflicts are raging around the world, while Europe faces economic uncertainty with projected growth of just 1.1% in 2025 and 0.9% in the euro area. And this volatile global landscape, Europe must rise not just as an economic actor, but also as a force for principle. And the EU may not be a traditional military power, but it possesses immense influence. The influence of values, diplomacy, law, and example. And that influence is strongest when rooted in unity, especially among neighbours. Slovenia's close cooperation with our neighbours, Italy, Austria, Croatia and Hungary, all fellow EU members, shows how regional trust can strengthen Europe's global voice. And we must now use the influence more boldly to defend truth, support peace and strengthen global cooperation. In a world that often seems to be spinning out of control, principled leadership matters. And Slovenia is proving that even a small country can lead, and with courage, with conscience, and a steadfast commitment to justice, human dignity and international law. And we will continue to do so, and I invite you all today and tomorrow to embrace our brainstorming activism of the Bled Strategic Forum and take an active role in shaping solutions that can make a world a fairer and a safer place. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Madam Minister. For 2 decades, the Bled Strategic Forum has been a crossroads of ideas and voices that shape our times. Let us now look back at some of the faces that have stood on this stage and at the numbers that tell the story of a world growing, changing, and struggling.
We've not started this war. We are defending our territory and we want to restore the territorial integrity.
I believe we must be ready on both sides by 2030 to enlarge.
This forum has become a tradition, and it is also a testament to Slovenia's global leadership.
Dear guests, before we set sail on new discussions and build on the legacy we have just revisited, it is my honor to invite to the stage the President of the Republic of Slovenia, Ms. Nataša Pirc-Musar.
Dear Speaker of the National Assembly of the Republic of Slovenia, Urška Klakočar Zupančič, Prime Minister of the Republic of Slovenia, Dr. Robert Golob, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct pleasure to welcome you to the 20th Bled Strategic Forum. 2 years ago, I had the privilege of watching a retrospective of past forum editions. Apparently, some members of the organizing team secretly shed tears of pride, and I would say rightly so. It is hard to comprehend the amount of time and energy that goes into making these events a success. So to all the BSF teams over the years, thank you. Much has changed in the last 2 decades. The glory days are over for our continent. Europe is no longer the global political and economic heavyweight. Nevertheless, countries across the world, big and small, want Europe as a reliable partner. A strong Europe, they say, can be an ally of those unwilling to be dependent on or commanded by the great powers. It is an honor to see the rest of the world wanting Europe to remain a vital player in international relations. However, we risk the opposite by giving it to politicians and political parties who prefer a weaker, less interconnected and less inclusive Europe. They believe bilateralism dwarfs multilateralism. They reject the very values on which European integration rests. Today, it is therefore more important than ever to discuss these values, the values that make that makes us human. It frightens me to say, but I must. 25 years ago, the European Union adopted the slogan, "United in diversity." Yet today, I fear we are not even close to making this commitment a reality. Instead of unity, we drift towards disunity. Ladies and gentlemen, is this how we wish to cooperate with and compete against the great powers? I hope not. I hope Europe will become a respected player in the international world stage. I hope that geopolitical discussions affecting and decisions affecting Europe are not and will not be made without Europe. And I hope Europe continues to stand firmly behind the central premise of the epilogue to the war of aggression against Ukraine, that no decision about Ukraine's future are made without Ukraine. Ladies and gentlemen, Europe will only be competitive if we learn to set aside our differences and self-interests for the success of the Union and all its citizens. This will only be possible if we believe in Europe as an economic and political project that everyone understands and supports. In such a Europe, we will not question democracy as a way of life. We will take the single market seriously. We will care for the poor, the elderly, and the vulnerable. And we will know how to fight for our interests as Europeans. Then there is diversity. There can be no respect for a diversity without basic human rights. That, however, is not the case. 70 years after the integration began, and 35 years since the Cold War ended, skepticism about human rights is spreading. Xenophobia and intolerance towards those who are different or think differently are major challenges. So are the denial of women's rights, marginalization of minorities, scapegoating of migrants, and alarmingly, support of genocidal and apartheid policies. Excellencies, esteemed guests, only 80 years have passed since the end of the Second World War. Only 80 years. And we already seem to have forgotten how vital human rights and dignity are for civilization and social progress. So deep is this collective amnesia that even the prevention of genocide, the most abhorrent crime against humanity, no longer carries the urgency it once did. I'm not here to compare the dehumanization of millions under Nazism and fascism, leading to the Holocaust and other crimes against humanity. Far from it. But I must say this. The world condemned the Srebrenica genocide and brought its perpetrators to justice. Why then, only 3 decades later, do some politicians tolerate, even defend, the Israel's genocidal policy against Palestinians in Gaza? The international community resoundingly condemned Hamas's terrorist attack in October 2023. How come? We have no such consensus when it comes to people living in Gaza. How can it be that there are still politicians, including in European Union member states, who tolerate that most people in Gaza have been displaced multiple times? That more than 90% of homes are damaged or destroyed? How can they accept acute shortages of food, water, fuel, medicine, and shelter? Or reports of Israel negotiating with South Sudan to transfer people from one war-torn land at risk of famine to another? Or the fact that humanitarian workers and doctors themselves are starving while trying to help those in need? How can they not be moved after the news hit the world that the Gaza City and surrounding areas are now, ladies and gentlemen, officially under famine? Distinguished guests, these are not rhetorical questions. As human beings, we must ensure that the Gaza Strip and the West Bank never fade from the political spotlight from several reasons. Firstly, because through our dealings with Gaza, we reveal who we are. Gaza has become a symbol of our attitude towards atrocities worldwide. If we cannot address Gaza, what legitimacy do we have to confront gross violations of human rights anywhere else? Secondly, because our handling of Gaza reflects our understanding of humanity. When Europe advocates human rights as universal values, do we truly mean it, or are they merely a tool for dominating political discourse? Thirdly, because humanity is indivisible. We are rightly united in strong condemning Russia's aggression against Ukraine. We stand with the Ukrainian people and support the principle of territorial integrity. We cannot allow a country to seize another country's territory just because it can. We cannot allow people to be killed merely for defending their country against an aggressor. In Ukraine, we defend international law and humanity. Values and norms are values and norms. Everywhere, for everyone, also in Gaza. Fourthly, because Europe needs to show unity in defending humanity. The EU's ultimate response to Israel's actions in Gaza will show the world how our leaders see Europe's future, whether democracy, unity, diversity and trust in international law remain at the center of the European integration. That being said, I find little cause for optimism. Attacks on democracy and fundamental freedoms are visible basically everywhere. Many of us grew up with leaders criticizing autocracies during the Cold War. Several of those regimes endure, and their practices are spreading, regrettably, even in Europe. Freedom of thought, academic freedom, and investigative journalism once shaped democratic discourse. Not anymore. And this is wrong. This is historically wrong. Without freedom of thought, there can be no progress. Attempts to restrict free speech are always met with resistance. Those who suppress freedom of thought and critical thinking always end up on the scrap heap of history. With this in mind, I would like to express my support for the initiative to award the Nobel Peace Prize to Francesca Albanese, the UN Special Rapporteur on the West Bank and Gaza, and to the doctors caring for the people of Gaza. They deserve recognition. They deserve recognition for risking their lives to restore peace and uphold humanity. They embody what multilateralism for human rights also means: preventing individual politicians from acting with impunity. Dear friends, we cannot stand by and watch history unfold without us. We must not let cold pragmatism drain the soul from Europe. Now is the time to speak truth. Bold, unwavering truth to power. To bring the united in diversity back to the very heart of the European dream in an enlarged European Union. Human rights and human dignity flourish in a world that is stable and just. But it is in times of crisis and uncertainty that the true test begins. The test of our courage, our conviction, our willingness to stand firm and defend our values. Now is the time to raise our voices, not in whispers of compromise, but in a thunder of determination. Let us reject those who bend their values to the winds of profit and personal gain. Let us fight for a Europe that speaks out loudly through every multilateral forum against injustice and exclusion, against every crime against humanity, and for every silenced voice. Ladies and gentlemen, as leaders, we shape the future, a path towards democracy, prosperity, and peace, or a spiral into fear, crisis, and war. This is our moment to choose the side of history we will stand on. Billions, ladies and gentlemen, billions depend on our choice. We Slovenians believe in justice, and we have no doubt. We stand firmly and proudly on the side of humanity.